Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're enjoying Atmosphere Australia Online. And welcome to our next panel discussion. We are living in a climate of change. COVID-19 has changed our lives and has fast-forwarded the future. Suddenly, we care more about our health and safety, food security and supply chains, our environment and access to nature, and more importantly, people. This new normal is moving us to a more caring, a more equitable, and a more sustainable future. So the question to the panel today is, are we ready for the future? After the panel, we will have the opportunity to take some questions, so please don't be shy and submit your question into the Q&A box. Now, I'm thrilled to chair this panel. We're going to hear from 3 inspiring women engineers on their perspectives about the industry, the changes we need to take, and the role of technology to make a more sustainable future together. Okay, let's start. On the panel today, we have Megan Dinsdale-Jones. Megan is a sales engineer with Pattern in Auckland and one of only 7 New Zealand women with an HVAC and R qualification. Thank you, Megan, for joining us today. Next is Jane Hagen. Thank you. So next is Jane. Jane is an engineer and a corporate ecologist. She's a director of Contexis and a founder coordinator of Australian Engineers Declare. Welcome, Jane.
Thanks, Caroline.
And we have also Urwa Sarfejo. Urwa is the country leader in integrated technology and digital solution at Johnson Control. Urwa is a mechanical engineer. She's also a board director of the Australian Institute of Refrigeration, Air Conditioning and Heating, AERA. Welcome, Urwa.
Thanks, Caroline.
As we start the discussion, I would love each of our panelists to tell us more about what they do, their experience, and then their perspectives on the changes to a more sustainable future. So I'm going to start with you, Megan. Can you please tell us more about your experience and especially new technologies like transcritical CO2?
Yes, yep. So I'm a qualified refrigeration technician. I have 13 years experience in the industry. I started off doing industrial, commercial and automotive refrigeration with a small company up north. And I moved down into supermarket refrigeration and expanded further with a company called Fonco, where they just spoke actually, and was their commissioning engineer for transcritical CO2 systems. That really is where my passion lies in the industry. I really love the transcritical side. About 6 months ago, I changed roles and I'm now a sales engineer for Pattern New Zealand. And we also have a subdivision, and that is SCM. So we now provide and commission SCM transcritical CO2 racks here. So that's a little bit of background about what I do and what I know there. CO2 is quite a versatile gas, and it's really where the industry is headed. Obviously, with naturals being prevalent, we're basically taking over. The main concern in my opinion, which I'm sure many people share, is that there is very little training around any natural refrigerants. There needs to really be transcritical CO2 training rigs set up here, ammonia training. There is a bit of that here, but not a huge amount. People just need more exposure to anything natural. Everyone seems to be a little bit scared of it, and there's absolutely no reason whatsoever to be scared of it. There is a cost that comes with it, obviously, but with the HFC phase down, you're getting the cost from the Freon anyway now. So yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting trying to get more and more people on board with the naturals side of things. But we are seeing more and more people showing a lot more interest, especially with the heat reclaim side of the CO2, which is it's obviously very, very efficient and a great refrigerant to use. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's fantastic. And what are the main changes that are happening in the HVAC industry, in your view?
Well, obviously, the phase down from the HFC to we're going to naturals. That's probably the main one. But everything's going digital as well. In my opinion, there needs to be a little bit more training on the digital side. The digital stuff is just taking over. The controls that we're seeing come through are just incredible. You can almost program a controller to do anything you like these days, and the skills aren't really there for a lot of technicians. There needs to be a bit more support, in my opinion. But I would say the main changes are the going to naturals and the more sustainable way, and the digitalisation of everything. The online learning as well. We've got a lot of online learning modules. Those have been quite handy. You know, it is as Friggy, when you can sit on a job and you're like, oh, you know, I really need an answer to that quickly. A lot of that information is available online now, which is quite helpful. Everything is available almost online. You can do online training modules that are giving you qualifications. I'd probably recommend doing practical training as well for a lot of them. But it's quite amazing how everything can be done via your phone now. You can get an app and connect your gauges so you can see exactly how your system's running from your cell phone. It's quite crazy, the change that's happened over the last 13 years that I've been in the industry. It's very cool, and I'm quite excited to see what's going to happen in the next 13 years as well.
Thank you, Megan. It's a very great insight. Now, Jane, you work with corporation at Contexis and with Engineers Declare Australia. Can you please tell us more about your experience and what you do?
Yes, of course. Quite a contrasting experience to Megan's. I'm fascinated to listen to the industry. I'm an aerospace engineer by training. My background is working for Boeing, but more recently I've chosen to work with large organisations, and predominantly we work in the space of behaviour and mindset changes, but also in aligning people to strategy. So my driver is for individuals in our biggest organisations to work personally with them and to accelerate the transformation of how they contribute to the planet and everybody that lives on it. I strongly believe that the biggest of our organisations have a significant role to play within the existing structures to influence change. And we're starting to see shifts in practice and approach from energy to refrigeration to oil and gas and built environment. So I think it's a really exciting time to be part of big industry. In terms of, Carolyn, your question around making sustainability real is such a relevant question, because for so many practitioners that don't touch it every day, it's somebody else's thing, or it's something that we do at home in our personal lives, but it doesn't affect the way we do our jobs every day. And so, Megan, listening to you and the changes in the refrigeration industry, that's a really good example of where that's really real for the practitioners in industry, and there's some really tangible things that start to come up in terms of barriers to change there. So I think when we work with organisations, we work very much on the fact that our human focus is often on the immediate, and what we look to do is to expand that focus beyond the immediate to the medium and the long term. And to appreciate how vulnerable our organisations and communities are, but not to wallow in that. So I think COVID has been a really good example of when we do have to adapt and we have to change the way we do business, we're actually pretty efficient at adapting. We're a pretty adaptable species. So we focus heavily on the impact organisations can have with what they already do. So that's something that I think is misunderstood in the sustainability space. So in a lot of cases, the big organisations we work with have pockets of exceptional practice within their organisations, but it's not the norm. And so a lot of what we do is work with them on what's working in those areas that you could transition to become the norm for your business. So it's about amplifying and aligning the impact that they're having. And really exploring the breadth of what that impact could be as well. So I think sometimes when you're in a particular role, in a particular context or organisation, your view on the impact you can have as part of that organisation or that organisation can have beyond itself becomes quite narrow. And so our role is often to provide space to have the conversations about how else you could be affecting people or planet, both from a sustainability and health and wellness point of view, throughout your supply and your customer chains.
Thank you, Jane. And now, Hura. Technology and digitalization are changing our lives, as Megan mentioned, and like everybody in the industry, everything is being more controlled and monitored. So can you please tell us about your experience and what you think about technology and how it can help mitigate the impact of climate change and improve our resilience?
Thanks, Caroline. Sure. So I have worked in the HVAC industry for the past 20 years. I only left the industry for 3 or 4 years to work in the sustainability and renewable energy industry, only to come back and be involved more than ever again in the HVAC industry, both because of my role at Aira and also working as a country leader for Johnson Controls in the digital solutions and integrated technologies division. And I can completely relate to what Jane was saying about, training people and making sure that they adopt technology, because that's one of the biggest issues that we have. Part of my role is to ensure that we engage, enable and empower everyone within the organization and within our clients and industry with the new trends, with digitization. There are new tools that we are using, and they shouldn't be seen as a threat to existing jobs, but as an opportunity to how we're going to be doing our jobs in the future. In terms of your questions about, climate change and how technology can actually mitigate risk, I would say that as humans, we have already caused major climate changes to happen, and we have set in motion more changes still. So even if we stopped emitting greenhouse gases today, global warming would continue to happen for at least several more decades, if not centuries. That's because it takes a while for the planet, for example, the oceans to respond. And because carbon dioxide, which is the predominant heat-trapping gas, lingers in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. So there's a time lag between what we do and when we actually feel it. So have we caused irreversible damage to our climate? Unfortunately, yes, we have. It may not be a way to avoid or limit some of the worst effects of climate change. So responding to climate change will involve a two-tier approach. One is mitigation, which is basically reducing the flow of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And two is adaptation, is learning to live with and adapt to the climate change that has already been set in motion. So in learning to adapt, we need to increase our resilience. And resilience, by definition, is a capacity to bounce back quickly from difficulties. More specifically, I would categorize or classify our resilience in the built environment into 3 different categories. Our environmental resilience is derived from sustainability. Our social resilience is derived from enhanced human experience. And our spatial resilience is derived from increasing the feeling of safety and security. And I strongly believe that technology has a major role to play in increasing our resilience in all three areas in the built environment. So today, for example, technology has dramatically evolved the way we manage and monitor energy consumption in buildings and plant rooms by employing machine learning and artificial intelligence and taking into consideration multiple IT and OT data sources to drive set points and ensure maximum efficiency, and buildings of the future are not just smart, but they're cognitive. They are smart plus the ability to learn and adapt. We also use advanced algorithms and analytics to identify and resolve potential faults and issues with plants like leaks and failures more proactively so that they don't go unnoticed for an extended period of time. On social resilience, which we can all relate to more than ever, given that we are in the middle of a pandemic. Some people may say this will pass, and investing in technology because of this one event is really not warranted. But global health experts are telling us that, unfortunately, pandemics are going to be occurring more frequently because of urbanization, because of global travel, population growth, and displacement. We are more than ever at risk of contracting zoonotic diseases that are transmitted between wild animals and human beings. Similarly with extreme weather conditions, for those of us in New South Wales, we remember the last summer bushfires and the consistent smoke pollution throughout the summer. Well, technology can help us feel safer and more comfortable at our place of work. Technology that can enhance indoor air quality, frictionless access where you can actually enter a building without having to swipe a card or push a button or push a door open, and technology also that can help you with social distancing and contact tracing, so that if someone is diagnosed within a work environment, you can quickly identify people at risk and isolate them, basically. So these are all examples of how we can enhance our social resilience by employing technology, so we can bounce back from these events and get back to normal sooner rather than later. One pandemic event has sent our economy into recession for the first time in the past 29 years, with the worst yet to come. And finally, our spatial resilience, which is derived from safety and security. We know, for example, that cybersecurity incidents are happening much more frequently. While we may be reasonably protected when it comes to our IT devices, our OT or operational technology in most of our buildings are quite exposed and vulnerable to cyber attacks. And most devices in buildings are connected in some shape or form, which increases the risk of cyber attacks. Technology can also mitigate and can also help us with cloud-based, video surveillance methods, for example, that can help manage security at thousands of locations with one browser interface to help mitigate the risk of intruder and terrorist attacks. So, as you can see, these are just some of the examples, but the future of the built environment is very human-centric, and it's focusing on wellness, engagement, and productivity, and technology plays a very important role in achieving that.
Thank you. Talking about adaptation, we had to change our life for the past 3 months, working from home. So what, in your view, how are we going to work in the future? And what lesson have you learned from the past 3 months? Who would like to answer? I will leave this question open. So maybe Jane, Megan?
I think I'm going to have probably a different perspective on this to the other two ladies because of the nature of my work.
That's fine.
But I think probably the biggest lesson, Carolyn, that I've personally learned is that much of what we thought had to be done face-to-face can be done virtually. That's the reality of the adaptation, and we've seen that from businesses that would never have told you they could work remotely, and have adapted. However, I think the flip side of that is for me, it's also heightened the value of personal connection, and you don't get that, in my opinion, via video. So I think the where you look for that, and I certainly think this is a conversation we're seeing within our clients as well about what is that balance, and there are huge advantages to remote workforces and to adaptive workforces, but what is that balance and what are the pros and cons, and creating space to have the conversation about the bits you want to keep versus the bits that actually aren't working for everybody, and recognising it's very individual as well.
Thank you, Jen. Megan, would you like to give your views on this?
I completely agree with what Jane said there. A lot of stuff is already online as a consequence of COVID. I'm doing a university degree. I'm doing a Bachelor of Business. I chose to do that via distance learning, but where I would normally be going in for exams, I will now be doing it all online. So there's quite a few changes that have come as a consequence of what's happened in the last 3 months. But yeah, I entirely agree with Jane, and it is getting the right balance between face-to-face and your connection with the people that you're dealing with.
Thank you. And Aura, so what do we think? Are we going back to the office, or we still going, to work remotely?
I think a bit of both. I think we're going to go from one extreme, which is, we were expected to show up in the office and sit at a desk so that, we were working, to the other extreme that we are constantly working from home. I think it's going to be a balance of both, and it's going to be more acceptable, more understandable for people to work from home as well as the office if they want to. I think the office is going to become a place of collaboration, of face-to-face meeting, of working together, rather than just having to go there just sit at your desk and work, because you can do that from home as well.
Thank you, ladies. It was a fabulous interview. And now let me see if we have, some question from the audience. Yes, we've got one from another woman from the industry. Okay, so the question is from Elizabeth Paparo, who worked for Kirby. And the question is for Jen or Ulrah. Now, the question is, we have an aging workforce. So what advice can you give to combat immunity to change and enhance the adoption of new technology? That's a great question.
It is. I think it's a really relevant question too. So lots of technical industries, I would imagine, HVAC included. I believe this year is the first year that the baby boomers will be the minority in the workforce. So it's a highly relevant question at a tipping point, arguably in age. In our work, we very much look for the value that person can bring, and the role of that in the adoption. So rather than focusing on the barrier of adoption, we're looking for, well, what is the unique thing that people who historically haven't rapidly adopted new technology or rapidly adopted new practice for that matter, what is the thing that they can bring that nobody else can? And often when coupled with potentially younger people or people who are just more adaptive to change, because I don't necessarily think it's an age issue either, we find that you can overcome that if you look for the unique thing that they bring.
Megan, can you give us your view, because I think that Elizabeth was referring that the industry is aging, and it's quite challenging, to attract young people on the tools. So how do you think that, the technician, for example, are they going to adapt, to having everything online? It's not their generation. So what do you think about that?
Definitely the older generation are going to struggle, and there are a couple of the older generation sitting downstairs watching this at the moment who already struggle. But there are a lot of younger people coming through. I would like to see more women coming through on the tools. But there are younger people coming through who technology is a part of life for our generation and the generations to come. So that's not going to be an issue, but the older ones are going to struggle, and they're going to struggle for quite some time, I would assume. You can see from a tech perspective, the older guys don't want to adapt to the new digital tools and stuff. They want to keep it all old school, as you'd say. They think that we're lazy. Really, technology makes us lazy, and in a way they're right, it does. We definitely are lazier as produce because of it, but it's also you've got to adapt and grow as the industry grows.
Thank you, Megan. Urwa, would you like to add something?
I tend to agree with both Megan and Jane and their views, but at the same time, I think it's how we engage with our older generation at workplace when it comes to technology and digital solutions. All these algorithms that we write and the knowledge that we are putting into technology comes from the older generation. They are the ones who actually have the knowledge that are teaching us how to design these tools and how to bring. So if you engage them at that level, then they actually find it quite interesting because it's their knowledge and information that is going into those tools. And they can visualize it in a different form. And the other thing that I would say is that I like to break it down. You can overwhelm people if you give them too many tools or too many devices to use. I like to break it down and say, this is relevant to your role, this part of it. You don't really need to know everything about it. Use it to do this part of your job. Embrace it, use it, enjoy it, and if it works, then you can come back and say, I want to know more about it. And I tend to see that works quite well.
Thank you. Okay, let me see if there is another question. Oh, yes, we have, so many questions coming again through. So let's take one. This one will be for Urwa, and it's from Peter Soufflies from Groveno Engineer. Okay. Urwa, given Johnson Control partnership with York, when will York equipment be strictly hydrocarbons?
I don't actually know the roadmap of our products. I do know that our refrigeration equipment are environmentally friendly. They use environmentally friendly gases, but when it comes to York chillers, unfortunately, I won't be able to answer that question, but I'm happy to get that information and come back to you later.
Thank you. Okay, we have now another question for Megan. And the question is from Julian Parker from Henry Group. Megan, what can you say to young female engineers who may not have thought about a career in HVAC&R?
That's a good question, actually. It's quite a difficult one to answer because this trade is still, unfortunately, not very accepting of women on the tools. So it is quite hard to promote that one. But I would say that it is the best decision I made, aside from getting married and having kids. It really is a rewarding career, and there are so many different avenues you can go down, and you just don't stop learning. And if you're anything like me, you love learning. It's just a trade that you'll never really be bored in. The industry's not promoted as much as it should be or could be. But there are, there's a women's in HVAC in our New Zealand group here who are trying to bring more women on board, and they're going into schools. They'll be doing the pitch to get women on board. Absolutely do it. Try it. If you don't like it, fine, but try it. I think you'll be very, very surprised. And most women would enjoy this kind of work.
That's correct. Yeah, fantastic. And we have last question from Priya from Atelier 10. How can we get folks in every part? Oh, sorry, I have to push the question. Sorry. Okay, so the question is, how can we get folks in every part of the HVAC workforce to embed sustainability and resilience into their work? Great question. Who would like to answer? I think maybe Jen, you will be the more appropriate to answer this question.
So, Priya, that's very much one of the reasons a small group of us founded Engineers Declare last year, and the declaration movements globally are growing. So there's Builders Declare and there's Planners Declare and Construction Declare, I believe, recently. And I think one of the reasons we did this is that, firstly, creating awareness of the impact that we can all have through the work that we do. And I think the conversation about industry transition in the HVAC space is highly relevant to this. It's, if you know that transition's coming, and we fundamentally know that the industry has made a decision to do that transition. Megan's point about continuous learning is the point, right? Go and educate yourself and find out where the industry is going and how you can have influence. And I think if you don't know where to start with that, find someone who can help you start, would be my other comment, because we hear from a lot of people that, well, I don't know what questions to ask, or I don't know what information to seek. And there are people in your industry that can help you answer that question. So finding the right question to ask and then going and educating yourself on an ongoing basis. I completely agree with what Megan was saying earlier.
Thank you, Jen. Again, ladies, thank you all, for, speaking today. It was a fabulous interview. And I think we are the proof, that women can be engineers and can work in HVAC and our industry. So thank you to all of you, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.